McDaniel can't move on it. Now he does. The shot, passing down. Rebound, score!
Hey, welcome to the Toe on the Crease podcast, where we're talking about anything and everything to do with the NHL. I'm SJ. That's the co-host there.
Willie Dubs. What's up, everybody? For those who are wondering why my background looks weird, I'm back recording Urchin Hill. Just a heads up. It's not the usual basement in Hamilton kind of shenanigans.
No more terrorist videos for now. If he gets kidnapped captive again, that could change. That
might change.
Yeah, I've just been watching some random hockey game on right now. The Wild and the Red Wings, which I don't understand why I'm watching this game.
Do you even have a fantasy player? I guess apart from Rossi's, that's the only one I can think of, right? That's
Goldie too, but no. So Goldie. I was watching Stars Blue Jackets, and can I say, Marchenko, beast. This guy comes back from a broken face basically and scores 2 goals.
He had an assist his first game back too, so he's got 3 points in 2 games, I think. So
yeah,
it's pretty lit.
Again, it's crazy. I always think about this with hockey, where just the difference in sports. The guy, Broken Josh, would normally sideline you for a sizable period of time. He's back in less than 3 weeks, and
I think half the recovery time. I think it's a 6 to 8 week recovery time for broken jaws typically. So he's back within less than half of it. So
yeah, so he's back in less than half the time, and he's scoring at the same rate he did before he got hurt.
Question: you've seen him play? So is his jaw wired shut kind of thing, or is it? I don't know if you've noticed it on the broadcast or anything. I'm kind of curious with that because they've
talked about it, but I don't know. They haven't they just mentioned how good he looks. They haven't really mentioned the specifics. Because I was watching more of the away broadcast, not the home. Because Columbus was the home team, right? So
yeah, it's I'm just trying to Google a picture of it.
The home teams, the home broadcast is pretty much a lot of talk about the Stars and their injuries because Bichel's out, Heiskanen's out.
What happened to Bichel? I thought he was healthy before.
He
just get hurt.
Got hit by a questionable. Got hit on a questionable play and might be out 5 to 7 days or so. I think so.
Okay, so not the end of the world, but
I know. But it's just it looks really bad on defense right now. No Heiskanen. I think Harley rested the first couple of games back. It just looked really funny. But I mean, they keep chugging along, right? Stars machine, baby.
Well, to be fair, Harley was supposed to be in Cancun, and then he got called, and then he kind of said, well, I can't turn this down, can I? I forgot. I think, was he supposed to go with Wyatt Johnston? I forgot who he was supposed to go to Cancun with. I'll have to check that out.
1, 2, 3, Cancun. Okay. All right, so today, just to cut in here, we're going to talk about our thoughts on the Four Nations. We've had a couple days after to kind of discuss it. We're just going to talk about that today, and then it's my turn to try to guess that player. And then I think the next episode after, we'll talk about things to look at for the second half of the year. But I do really want to talk about the Four Nations just to kind of get it all in one episode and not... Because it really did captivate a majority of, the sports viewing world during that week it was there, right? So 2 weeks it was there. So.
Yeah. I was going to say, there's a lot of people I saw on Twitter that mentioned that they never watched hockey in their life, but they tuned in for that particular tournament. So I think that says a lot for what the Four Nations Cup kind of did. And I guess props to the NHL for, setting it up, right? Because a lot of the times it's just a glorified all-star weekend where everyone does the stupid skills competition. And then you see the quote unquote all-star game, and it's people just kind of floating around doing nothing. Kind of similar to what the NBA all-star games kind of turned out to be. Just random dunks.
To be fair, the NHL all-star game is normally like this. This was an exception, not the rule. But I think that was my first thought coming out of this was, everyone just misses Olympic hockey. Can we just say that and be honest about it? Because that's literally what it was. It's not even just the Canada-USA part of it, right? USA-Sweden was the most watched non-playoff hockey broadcast on TNT and Max. And the cheapest ticket price going into the gold medal game. Do you want to guess what it was? For a single ticket. Cheapest ticket price.
I'll go 600.
Higher.
1,200. I'll double it. I think I've seen some 1,300s. I could be wrong.
$1,222 was the cheapest ticket.
So was that the Upper Deck Bowl, the 500 level?
Yeah,
Upper Deck Bowl
that tells you how much people are missing Olympic hockey. USA Canada peaked at 5.2 million viewers. Finland Sweden, which is a rivalry, but to be fair, people in North America don't care about it as much. 1.7 million. Like, let's just be honest. We love in any sport national best on best. And for all the credit I give the NHL for this, I give them fault because we were deprived of it for a decade. And think about how much we missed during that decade that we didn't have Olympic hockey.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think the last time was it Sochi? Sochi? Am I wrong? I don't remember the exact. It was the 2014 Olympics. Don't remember if that was Sochi or not. But anyways. So it's actually been more than 10 years since we've gone. I think it'll be 12.
Yeah,
12. Yeah, 12 is a long time. You think about it. I think there was the 2018, then the 2022. We had to see a bunch.
You think about it. How many presidential terms? The pandemic. Yeah, it's been a lot. For sure. Like, how much has bypassed since then? Like, you look at all the players that were on that last 2014 team compared to now, and it's like a completely different wave, right? And I will say, like, one thing I did like about this, it sets up really well for the Olympics. And I read the NHL was instituting the World Cup of Hockey just without the weird under whatever team and the team Europe or whatever the heck. Like, I think it sets up really well because it shows you that there's a demand for this. There's a want for this. And this was just 4 teams. So, like, imagine once you start getting more countries into this, there's a real want, which I think is important to grow the game.
Yeah, so they're trying to do the World Cup of Hockey, I think, in February of 2028. So they're trying to sandwich it between the 2 Olympic years, the 2026 and 2030. So I think that's going to be, that's going to be good for hockey in general, right? Because I hate the idea of waiting 4 years for best on best kind of hockey. So it's nice to split it kind of every 2 years. So I think of it the same way as, I'll say football, but North Americans will call it soccer. It's like when you see the World Cup, there's also the Euros too, right? So it's like the World Cup, then the Euros 2 years, then the World Cup again. I kind of like that the NHL is doing that little split where they'll put it right between the Olympics, so we get kind of more best on best hockey. But I think for the time being, we're gonna have to wait until the Olympics 2026 to see the next version of this. I guess
it's a good mix where it's not going to happen every year, but it's not. It's so you'll there's that anticipation that builds towards it, but it's also not long enough that you're like deprived of it, right? So you keep momentum every 2 years, which I think is like the right amount of time.
I think it's the perfect amount of time, actually, because you can't do it every year. Every 3 years feels just a tad bit too long, and every 4 obviously is just way too long. So I think 2 is probably the perfect number.
And the one thing I think that helps, what I thought helped the 4 nations, and what I think is going to help the Olympics is the gap between Canada, let's say the best team, and the other top countries is just closer than ever. Like, I don't know if people remember what 2014 was like, but Canada felt like they were by far the best team. If you remember, Sweden made the final, and Nick Backstrom was out due to migraines, if I remember correctly. And it was so bad going into that Canada there were Canadian fans, I remember, that were like, oh, like, let's hope at least Sweden can keep this close. And spoiler alert, they didn't, right? But you look at one thing you watched during this tournament is the gap felt closer amongst the major teams, right? And it's not like other sports. Like, when you watch Olympic basketball, it's pretty much who's going to come close to beating Team USA. And it's realistically, Team USA doesn't even send their best players, and they still beat every other country pretty soundly for the most part. Or what they would be, like, they're trying Olympic flag football, I think, at some point, which I don't even know why they're going to bother. Like,
Americans for the gold. Well, I was gonna say, I think the Americans sent probably their best version of the team this time around, right? Basketball wise, the Olympics, they sent their best team for once. Versus,
and
I think
everyone was hoping was like, oh, can we make it close, right? Like, but I don't feel the same way here. I feel like it feels more like baseball, where like there is one best team, but there are a bunch of teams. Like in baseball, you have the USA, yes, but you also have Venezuela, you have the Dominican Republic, you have Japan, right? This kind of feels a lot more like that. And if you look at it, all the games, this minus USA Finland, were really close, right? Team like Canada, Finland, I thought it was going to be a blowout, and it was initially, but Finland rallied back. Finland, Sweden was really close. Sweden, Canada was really close. Obviously, both USA, Canada games were really close. There's not as much separation amongst the hockey playing nations, at least the major ones. And that's not even including if Russia gets unbanned. Because if they join in, now you're talking about, potentially 5 teams that have a really good chance, right?
Well, I saw the news. I don't know if you saw on Reddit, but I saw the news. Apparently, the IOC is going to petition to bring the Russians back for 2026. So
Hot
they'll
take,
probably make a little
I'm
bit.
for it. I want to
I
see.
think I'm for the hockey. I'm not for the political part.
Oh
but
yeah, for sure. No, I'm not talk. We don't talk about politics on this podcast, but like for the
Yeah.
hockey part of it, yes, I absolutely want to see one more Ovechkin, because this honestly might be the last like Ovechkin Malkin Olympic year we get. Let's be honest, right?
Do you even think Ovechkin makes it to the Olympics? I don't want to say
100%.
doesn't. It's just
100%.
like,
He will come.
He is slowing.
He will.
He is going to slow down.
He will fake, like if he's hurt, he will pretend he's not hurt to come play for Olympics one last time. Like this guy broke his leg or fibula earlier during the year. He still came back. Like you think he's not going to come back for the chance to represent his country? Absolutely.
I think it's more will he just be too old and too slow by that time? Because let's be honest, there's been some decline, and we can't.
Doesn't matter.
That, right?
Just put him up, set him up in the same spot, and you're fine. That's it. He just has to get to the spot.
You just camp him in the neutral zone.
You just get him to his spot. That's it.
Well, yeah, you camp him in the neutral zone. Let him skate in.
Also, like there are other guys I want to see too. Like I want to see Shesterkin. I want to see Kaprizov. I want to see again Ovechkin and Malkin. I want to see what Sergachev looks like as like the number. There are a lot of good players that are going to be there. Their team's a little bit weird because it's all wing loaded, but still, like it's another team that you could argue could win it. And again, this isn't even including teams like Germany who have, guys like Leon Draisaitl, like arguably the best player in the NHL this year wasn't in this Four Nations tourney, right? Guys like Draisaitl, Stützle, guys who, the Swiss team will have Hischier and Yossi. So we're talking about a lot.
Pasternak. Yeah.
Right. Like there's going to be a lot of like once the Olympics comes around, it's going to be fun because you're going to have Canada's the best, but a lot of teams just nipping at their heels that are right there. And then some other teams who aren't as good overall but still have studs. It's going to be a fun watch when the Olympics roll around.
I can't wait. Like I know that it's a year away now. Thank goodness. I was going to say it's 2 years away, but thank God it's only a year away now. But 1 year away, and we'll finally get that best on best, like the actual true best on best format that we wanted. Because I think it sucks that this cup. I don't get me wrong. The games were captivating and perfect. It's just sometimes you wish there was more teams in general and you had more time to run it. But the reality is, in the middle of NHL season, you just can't get that. Can't stop the season for a good month unless like it's the Olympics, right? The Olympics is the sole exception for that.
Yeah, and I mean it's also one of those things where you watch, and I kind of did want to see more of some of the other guys because normally in the longer tourneys the goalies get to play, like some of the other goalies get to play a bit more, and we obviously in a short tourney you're just not going to see it. I think Ottinger played one game because the U.S. clinched the final early. But
Canada
most of the other,
Canada only played Bennington like the whole tournament, so the other two guys didn't even dress. I'm trying to think of the other. I think Finland played their goalies, but I think it's more based on circumstance than anything else.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Gonna have to come in.
It's kind of nice to see, and sometimes if you remember when Team Canada, Team Canada's had tourneys where one of their goalies got shelled early and they replaced him with another one, and they had enough time where they went through the tourney and won, right? I think 2002 Salt Lake was like that. If I remember
Curtis Joseph got replaced. I think they replaced him with this Brodeur. I think was it Brodeur? I could be wrong. I'm a little bit iffy on the.
Right.
I know it's Joseph who got replaced, but yeah.
But the idea being, that can happen in a long tourney can't really happen in a short tourney a lot of the times, right? So, I don't know. I'm stoked. Like this kind of brought back that juice, and I'll admit I was skeptical going in, right? Because I was like, how seriously are these guys going to take it? What's it going to look like? And then the minute the first game hit, I was all in. I was completely wrong, and I fully admit it.
Yeah. I think for me, when I saw the first game, the Canada-Sweden game, I was kind of curious how the tournament would end up, like you said. Was it one of those, like, skate around, people just kind of chilling? I didn't think it would be on the same level of the All-Star games, where it's just the skate around casually, 3 guys on the ice kind of just trolling around. But I thought maybe the intensity wouldn't be as high. But holy smokes, throughout the whole tournament, it was just the intensity was just next level. People wanted to take each other's heads off, man. It was bad. The trash talking. Also, the trash talking. That's my favorite part. We need more of that in hockey. Like just more of that, like through the media and all that crap. Like I'm all for it.
I think it's a lesson to any sport. It really is what your players make it. I think the All-Star games, like all those off season. Like I remember watching the NFL, and the NFL Pro Bowl is a joke now, right? But I remember watching some of the old Pro Bowls, and like there was one where Sean Taylor, rest in peace, decked the punter of the opposing.
The Bills punter, the Bills punter. I saw that one.
It's like it made you excited to watch, and you realize like as you get older, and people are like, oh, why aren't the All-Star games like they were before? It's like, well, at the end of the day, I think this is a sign to everybody. It is what the players make it, right? If you make it an exhibition where no one's really doing anything, well, that's what you're going to get. And the NHL contrast is the best example. The NHL All-Star game normally is a joke. I barely pay attention to it. But this, I was watching every game I could.
I think the one year I tuned in for the All-Star game was that John Scott year. But apart from that, I didn't.
Yeah, that was the only one.
Any other year. Yeah, and then this one, I mean, best on best hockey, the high level intensity, like that's what everyone wants to see, right? Nobody wants to see that low intensity All-Star game. And I think you mentioned the Pro Bowl for the NFL. I think they just do flag football now, just like really casual flag football, trolling around kind of stuff. Not fun to watch. I watched the skills competition. That's it.
Like baseball probably has the best All-Star game just because it's like you can regulate the play in a way, right? Like pitchers only throw one inning. Like it's very easy to
Although my question about the MLB one, do they still do it where the I guess the winning side gets home field advantage for the World Series?
No.
Okay,
but
so
it's still fun. Okay. It's still a good watch, I will say.
Okay,
like those ones were crazy. I remember there was one year it ended in a tie, which was a different story.
Wait, was that when they still had the home field advantage thing or no?
Yeah.
So who got the home field that year then? Was it just whoever had the better record?
I can't remember. It was okay. It was just a Bud Selig moment there. But yeah, like the other thing too with the competitiveness is just, you know how you used to fantasy dream up what like things would look like when certain players got together? We kind of got to see it, right? Which was kind of cool. I mean, like the power play was basically McCarr, McDavid, McKinnon, Crosby, and then throw in a fifth guy. It doesn't matter, right? Like that's like a hero line in an NHL video game. We got to see Gensel, Matthews, and Hughes, which was a really good line. I mean, the Tkachuk bro is basically recreating the Bash Brothers and the Mighty Ducks, and the Eichel line was my favorite line of the tournament, without question.
So many possibilities that we'd always hoped to see, but we never got to see because, goddamn, the NHL having to back out of the Olympics, the last two Olympics essentially, kind of spoiled it for us. But I think now us getting to see this was just kind of crazy. I think the Tkachuk brothers also did play with Matthews for a bit, and I thought that line was kind of crazy, just having the pure goal scorer and then just the two other guys just run everybody over and do all the dirty work.
That was like the Bash Brothers and Charlie Conway. It was awesome. Like, if the Bash Brothers were actually skilled offensively, but like,
well, I was gonna say the souped up versions of those guys. Because let's be honest, Conway wasn't super skilled.
My line I wanted to see was the Tkachuk Bros and JT Miller, because I thought that was gonna be a chainsaw. Like that would have been the chainsaw line to me. You just let that line loose. Oh my god. But like that line, I thought it would have been cool to see Hagel, Sorelli, Marner as like an all-time Selke level line that can score. Would have been really cool. Sweden had like their perfect D pairings, like Hedman, Brodin, Carlson, Forsling, Dahlin, Anderson. Is just like, that's like the perfect contrast of like guys, right?
I think the only team we were robbed of was probably Finland. Like their D-core, I think they lost. I think I'll just read it out to you. So Heiskanen, Hakanpää we knew was never going to play because I don't think he's played a single game this season. But and then Rasmus Ristolainen, who's been better than in previous years. I'll give him that.
I will say, look, people are gonna say I'm biased because I'm a Stars fan. I think Miro Heiskanen was the biggest loss to a team from we can't replace this guy standpoint in this tourney. Like Quinn Hughes was a big loss for the US, yes, but they still had Werenski and they still had Adam Fox, even though Adam Fox was invisible for parts of this tourney. But they still had guys who could replace that archetype. Finland had nobody they had guys on defense. I'd like to think of myself as a fairly knowledgeable hockey fan. I legit had no idea who some of these guys were. Like, they had some guy named Martin Paolo or whatever. I was like, who the fuck is this
I was
guy?
looking at the roster days right now. I was about to say, are you about to say Martin Paolo? Because I was going to say the other ones are at least quite...
Or like Urhol. Was Vikinen the guy in that Fleury trade?
No, he was the guy in the Trouba trade.
Sorry, yeah. But it's like just these random filler guys. I'm like, oh my god. And then the first practice, they didn't even have a full team to practice. Like, that's how decimated they were.
I think the only thing that kind of robbed this tournament was the injuries, because obviously it would have been nice to see the U.S. with Quinn Hughes. Obviously, them losing McAvoy kind of hurt, because I think McAvoy was a big factor against Canada the first time around.
For
Just
sure,
him just
yeah.
laying the body. So losing him kind of sucks.
I mean, Canada too.
Um,
Morrissey and Theodore, like just having basically to rely on Makar for the final was tough. Again, Finland with pretty much their most important players gone. Sweden was like the only help. I can't think of Sweden really losing anyone. Maybe
Jacob
Markstrom.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Markstrom,
okay.
and then I don't really count William Karlsson because Raquel was actually a pretty fine
Better,
replacement.
yeah.
I even thought
But
he was
yeah,
better, to
no,
be fair.
I think that was the one thing that hurt it. It was the injuries. But overall, like, I mean, it was still, like I said, overall, I still, at least the teams kept it. Like, I give all the credit to, like, to me, Finland is the definition of, like, punching above their weight. I think if you talk about it in any sport, Finland's always that team. I don't know, and shout out to them because they always do it. Every year, we always underestimate them in the juniors, in the senior circuit, and it doesn't matter. They somehow always end up better than you expect. Like, who didn't have Finland last after all these injuries? And here they are, like, they beat Sweden. They kept it pretty competitive with Canada, all things considered, despite the fact they have, like, nobody on defense right now. And it's something that's been going on for, like, 30 years. I don't know how they do it. Like, back in, again, 98 Nagano, if you look at the team, that won bronze. That team wasn't that good. It was like Yuri Lettinen, Timu Solani. Their best defenseman was Teppo Numminen and like a young Kimo Timonen. So like not even anywhere near what his prime would be. And they had two goalies who I don't even think played in the NHL at that time. And that team won bronze.
Well, I was gonna say the Finns always. I hate to say this, they always just find a way to
Find
hang
a
around.
way.
It just doesn't. It doesn't matter what it is. I think even in this year's World Juniors, right? I think I talked about it with you. They only had what, one first round pick, and then I mean they lost to Canada the first game, but they are actually one of the only teams to beat the U.S. and they took the U.S. to an overtime and basically a gold medal game, right? And they took out some. I think they took out. I can't remember if they took out Sweden as well, but they took out quite a number of teams they probably should have taken out. I think Sweden was one of them too. I could be wrong, but they took out teams they probably shouldn't have taken out. But again, that's the Finnish spirit. Just fight and lay it all out there, apparently.
This it's funny because this tourney reiterated all the stereotypes, right? Like Canada's probably the best hockey nation, but the margins getting smaller. The US is right there, right? Like right nipping at their heels. Sweden's the underachiever and Finland's always the overachiever. And that's just what it was, basically. Just manifested itself during the Four Nations.
I was getting one a little bit off topic thing I want to mention. How much stock like does the Team USA doctors lose now, given what's happened with McAvoy, Kachuk, and all the guys? Because that was some crazy. I don't know if you saw the news on that. That was kind of crazy.
I've never heard, like, normally people are really reticent to criticize medical teams, and rightly so, right? It's not our area of expertise. Generally, it's not even the team's area of expertise, right? So to hear criticism actually come out towards it was actually pretty fascinating. Like, you only hear about it in other sports when, like, there's a real issue with medical teams. Like, New Orleans in basketball, the Pelicans, like, their medical team always gets shit because there's always been issues with their medical team when it comes to basketball side. And also, if I remember correctly, for a while, the owners of the Pelicans had their football doctors perform on the basketball players. They didn't have two separate medical staffs. So, like, stuff like that is where, like, I hear criticism. So, yeah, I was really surprised when that came out.
Well, I think it's how everything happened, right? Because with the McAvoy shoulder injury, they tried to treat it, and then it got infected to the point where he just had to leave for the tournament. So that was already getting them some flack. And I think with the whole Kachuk thing too, because they basically cleared. I guess he got cleared to play the finals, but then he only played, I think, 6 minutes of the finals. So, and then now he's missing games for his NHL team, right? And I don't know if Brady Kachuk's missed a game or two with the Sens too. So definitely some question marks towards the USA doctors, apparently, from what I heard.
Well, there was also the weird, like, is Quinn Hughes playing or is he not, but he's coming kind of thing, which
they kept saying he was coming, and then the Vancouver's medical team didn't clear him to come, I think. So that was kind of interesting. I just thought it was a really interesting saga.
Yeah, no, definite. Outside of, like, maybe, I'm trying to think of somebody else who had a bigger, maybe except Team Sweden, I can't think of anyone else who had a bigger stock down than the U.S. Medical doctors there.
Well, the other thing too was there. I think throughout the tournament too, there was kind of. I think there was like a flu kind of spreading through all the teams because I think Sweden got hit by it for their like last round robin game. Same with the U.S. because I think there was a bunch of the U.S. guys that got rested. I think Matthews was probably one of the guys that got hit by the bug too. There was some, and then obviously I think Morrissey. I think Morrissey was an illness. I think for the finals too. Man, it was just flu bug all around.
I wouldn't be surprised if it came from the Carolina Hurricanes because they had a flu bug. Again, no proof to this. But if I remember correctly, the Hurricanes had like a massive flu bug go through. And then you think about it, right? Who were on the teams? Slavin, Jarvis, Rantanen, Aho. They were everywhere, right? So
Do they have a Swedish player? I can't on one of the teams. That's the team that got hit by it too. But I'm just trying to wonder.
oh, okay. But, then I don't know. But like
Okay,
my
maybe the
theory
theory's a
had
little bit
legs.
dead now. Had some legs until I ruined it. Okay.
But yeah, no. I thought overall it was really interesting. I think another thing we have to kind of look at is when I talk about the gap lowering with Canada being the best team, but the other teams being close is like I think Canada has to ask some real questions about when it comes to developing defensemen and goalies because it's just not. I don't want to sound like an old man and be like it's not what it used to be, but it's not. Let me read out their decors from previous Olympics. Right, the 1998 Defense Corps: Chris Pronger, Al McInnes, Scott Stevens, Rob Blake, Ray Bork, Adam Foote, Eric Desjardins. That's what 5 Hall of Famers. Sorry, 5 Hall of Famers and 2 really good defensemen for a long period of time, right? Now let's cut to 2014. Duncan Keith, Drew Doughty, Shea Weber, Alex Pietrangelo, and it was so good. PK Subban was the 7th defenseman. That's a Norris winning defenseman as basically your spare, right?
Yeah, he won the Norris the prior year, right? I think he just won it the prior year of that.
And you look at it, Keith, Doughty, Weber, and are all Hall of Fame defensemen, right? And this year's iteration just didn't feel as deep. And you really noticed it when Makar wasn't there because the offensive production just felt night and day different. When you watch that one USA game and their ability to generate out the back end when Makar wasn't there versus all the other games, it's night and day. And I don't ever remember the Canadian defense feeling so reliant. And yes, Theodore and Morrissey weren't there at the end, but they were there at least during the first USA game, and it still felt night and day different. And I don't ever remember it being the case. And here, I would argue, honestly, the USA, even without Hughes and Sweden, had better defense cores.
Well, I was gonna say with Canada too. I think Pietrangelo chose to sit out the tournament too, right? Because of like quote unquote injuries. So I think the first 4 Canadian defensemen are fine, and I think overall, I think it's less the defensemen, it's more the goalies I'm worried about because I think since I'm the prospect guy, I still see a bunch of decent defensemen coming out for Canada. Like if you're thinking about the next couple guys, Matthew Schaefer supposed to go first overall, I think this year's draft, and then there's that Landon DuPont guy. I think you and I have kind of talked about. He's supposed to go, I think, probably first in his draft year. So there's still guys coming through. It's more the goalies that we don't see, right? Because we were down to, what is it, Jordan Binnington, Sam Montembeault, and who was the third one?
To be fair,
Hill.
They didn't bring the right goalies. I know Binnington was clutch at the end, sure, but like, thank goodness for Logan Thompson and Mackenzie Blackwood playing the way they are right now, because I don't know going into next year if this was the goaltending core you were going to bring in for a longer tourney. Like, good luck.
So who you would say the 3 goalies are probably Binnington. We'll go with Thompson and Blackwood.
Yeah,
is that the 3?
I think Thompson should be the starter personally,
and then Blackwood's the backup probably. I'd say.
Yeah. Like, and you noticed the difference. People are going to say Binnington was clutch, yes. If you watch the game and watch the difference between Hellebuck and Binnington, it was night and day. Like, night and day.
Well, I was gonna say the only time Binnington really stepped up, I think, was that overtime, right? Because he looked fine throughout the rest of the game, but I think with Hellebuck, there was an obvious difference as to. I don't want to say it felt like there was a mounting pressure on Canada to score, but it was like you know that kind of pressure where it's like kind of crushing your chest and you kind of feel it.
No,
that's kind of the way I
like
described
the
it.
USA. I felt like USA was pushing the momentum towards like again, Canada won great, but you have to admit, like, that middle of the third period, right up until near the end of overtime, like the USA was pushing, and you felt the pressure.
Yeah, well, I mean, like the pressure. I was talking more about the pressure, like their pressure to at least get a couple goals. Because I think the thing was that they
Yeah,
knew if they couldn't get 1 or 2 goals, they'd probably just lose the game. Because look, don't get me wrong, I love Binghamton, but I feel like he's usually due for allowing 3 goals, and I
well,
feel
the
like you
thing
need to
is,
get at
he's
least
kind of
three.
like this. He's kind of like the Stuart Skinner, like the roller coaster goalies, right? Like the peaks make you think, oh man, like again, peak Bennington was like, oh, this guy could win a Vesna, but the problem is you don't see it enough, and a lot of times for every hot stretch he has, you'll get a cold stretch where he looks like he should be out of the league, and it's the same with Stuart Skinner. Like, I mean, you watch Stuart Skinner's last couple games after the Four Nations, and you'll see why Oilers fans are frustrated with him. Like, it's the
I was
perfect, and like, and the thing is, I don't know what the answer is, because this has been a goal. This has been an issue since for like 20 years now. But Canada's lack of development in goalies, especially when you compare them to, again, Russia, you compare them to Sweden, you compare them to the USA, obviously, where there's like the USA has a backlog of goalies right now that is in like there are really good goalies that won't touch Team USA for the next 10 years, and it's not their fault. It's just they're too stacked right now.
I'm kind of curious to see in the next 10 years development of goalies how that goes for some of these countries. I think someone should probably do a study on it just to see like numbers wise, like how much of a decline like in terms of Canadian goalies we've had, and then like I want to see the rise with the other countries too, right? Because you mentioned with Russia, it's what is it, Vasilevsky, Shesterkin, and Sorokin. Although
Yeah.
albeit 2 of them are having down years, but I mean, Canadians will probably take any one of those 3 at this point. Hate to
But
say
like
that.
think but
Um,
think about the US goalies, right? You have guys like think about all the guys that weren't on this team goalie wise, right? Like you have Stolars, who's having a great year for Toronto, right? Wool, who's been pretty solid. Dustin Wolf, who's waiting in the wings but might not make the roster, right? Like you think about Swayman, who's relegated to the third goalie, and granted, down year this year, but like overall, like has been a pretty good goalie. Might not make it. Honestly, might not make the team next year. Like Thatcher Demko, who prior to injury was a top 10 goalie, might probably won't ever make the team. There's just so many guys that are there that just won't, like, again, probably won't ever scrape starting minutes on a USA roster that like Canada would pray for. Like Canada was trying to pray to get Joey Daccord to join Team Canada because it's so bad right now.
I'm trying to look at like the upcoming prospect goalies, but I just don't see very many coming that are Canadian. Like I'm just doing a draft, like a quick look up on Google. Like even in the drafts, I think there's supposed to be one guy coming in one of the next 2 years, but that's it, really. Only one guy's supposed to go in
Like
the first round.
like it's crazy when you watch some of the seasons that guys like Decord, Dustin Wolf, guys like Anthony Stolars that are having, and they just won't come anywhere near this roster right now.
It's crazy.
But again, it's just an interesting development thing I've noted where like I think Canada's where a lot of times back in those other years, Canada felt so much more well rounded. Felt like it was definitely carried on the strength of its forwards and Cale Makar.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was pretty evident out there when you watch the defenseman play. It was like when you saw McCarr, it was like very dynamic, smooth. But like with some of the other D pairings, like when I saw Pareko out there, for example, there were times where I'm not gonna say I wanted to bang my head out there, but the amount of giveaways, that like how I don't want to say how clunky things look out there with him, like that kind of bugged me as well. But I think it also helps him McCarr too because they took his literal NHL teammate to play with him, right? They took Devon Tays.
Mm.
And I think he's actually like the perfect defenseman to pair with McCarr, right? So I think it helps him in that regard. Uh, I mean, we didn't get to see much of Theodore at all in the tournament, so I can't really say much about him. Harley looked pretty good in the when he did play.
Thomas Harley
The problem,
again.
the problem
Not
was
to
he
be
didn't play very
biased,
much.
not to be biased, man. That tournament raised my stock of Harley because I've watched Harley for X amount of games. He's been good, a bit inconsistent here and there, but he's been pretty good for a young defenseman. Watching him play in those tight moments made me understand exactly what the hype was. Because you see the glimpses when you watch him. Like you see the skating, you see the shot, you see the potential physicality when he needs to be. But like watching him in a tight moment play the way he did just absolutely raised my stock on it. And I was surprised he was. I'm not gonna lie, I was surprised he was there to begin with. But watching him, I'm like, hey.
I mean, I guess my question was, who else would they have called?
That's the weird thing, right?
That's the question. I think that's the question you have to ask. Like, which other Canadian defenseman would you have called up for that? Right? You knew Petrangelo was out, so he wasn't going to get the call. Like, here, let's just do a quick. I'm just going to do Canadian NHL defense.
Is Mackenzie Weegar? Yeah, he's Canadian.
I mean,
there were guys I thought could have been on the roster, like Jacob Chychrun. I thought Thomas Chabot, Dougie Hamilton. Thomas Chabot's having a really good year for Ottawa. Like guys like that. So I mean, no, like, but again, it's
I guess like Noah Dobson, if he was having a better year too, probably Noah Dobson, probably another one.
It's just interesting because I just look at that core and you compare it to if Quinn Hughes was healthy, right? You have Hughes, Fox, and Werenski with like Slavin. You know, you have like guys like you have one of the best defensive defensemen. You have arguably a guy just as good as Makar offensively on the defensive end, and Werenski, who's been honestly having a borderline MVP year. Like, it's just weird to me where if you compare the rosters to where they were 10 years ago, it's, again, like I said, the margin's closing. And I think Canada really needs to look at, hey, like, what can we do to get this back on track?
Well, I think part of it, too, is the sport's just getting too expensive, right, for people. It's one of those things where the entry, one of the barriers to entry is the cost. I find it's because, I hate to say this, but when you look at other sports, for example, like soccer, right? Canada's on the rise in soccer. And one of the biggest things is there's a lot more free-to-play programs with soccer. And obviously, soccer is a lower-cost sport. I will give it that. You know, it doesn't cost you $1,000 for cleats kind of thing. Whereas, like, you know, with goalie equipment, it's probably going to cost you, I want to say at least close to $1,000, right? For all the goalie equipment, probably.
Yeah. And you have to replace it every 2 years, usually.
Exactly. And like, I hate to say this, your cleats, like, yeah, you might replace it after every year, but like it's a couple hundred at most. And there's a lot of free to play programs.
So how does it work in other European countries? Is it just less expensive or is it subsidized? Because what would be the argument for like Canada not producing, but Russia, Finland, Sweden? Like, what's the argument there?
I am actually kind of curious with that. I don't know if it's like the increase of I actually don't know if it's like the increase of rinks there or like if there I actually would like to see like if there's programs there in the European countries that let you kind of play for like cheaper costs.
Because to me, I think it's something if your argument is cost and that's why the US is starting to develop better, I'll give you that, right? Like US, like if you look at other sports like AU sports and stuff like that, parents will pay for their kids if they think they're going to make it, right? And hockey is a traditionally upper class sport, but I just want to know like what's the argument for like Sweden, Finland, and Russia and countries like that, because I have to assume that I don't know if it's like subsidization by the government. I don't know if it's just a cheaper cost. I don't know if there's specific like clubs and programs that help subsidize the cost, but that part doesn't quite add up to me. Like, why is a country with way less population? And honestly, like in some of those countries, like, you know, like hockey really competes with nothing else here. Like, let's be honest, right? I mean, basketball and soccer are starting to be on the rise, but the numbers still aren't the same. But like there, you know, you're talking about sports like soccer that really heavily compete with, with hockey, right? So
I am kind of curious. I do want to pull up some info about this. I don't know if have you seen anything like regarding this? Like, I'm just trying to pull some up right now.
I mean, I see anecdotal stuff, but nothing statistically definitive. That's why I've just always been curious. If anyone like watches it, just like can throw out a comment, like that'd be awesome because I'm befuddled by it. And again, it's weird because again, there was a time where, you know, our goalies were like, we had an Olympics where there was Brodeur, Waugh, and Belfour. And Belfour was, again, Hall of Famer who didn't even touch the ice. And now it's hey, Joey Decord, can you fake your citizenship so we can get you on our team? Hey.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just doing some. I was just looking over and just doing some. I found an article. I was trying to do some reading on this, but I really can't find anything for the moment at least for the cost argument. But I mean, the cost of hockey is getting more expensive in Canada. That is a fair point, I will say.
Yeah, no, cost of youth sports is getting like I think. Even stuff like because of travel leagues and stuff like that, everything's just becoming more costly in general.
I was wondering though, with the European countries, don't a lot of them have like academy teams and stuff? I wonder if that's a little bit different than like
I don't know if they do for hockey. That's the thing. I know they do for
I
soccer.
think some do though. I think some countries definitely do have it for hockey. Not all of them obviously, but a couple of them probably do.
So
And I
like
think
you
that
think like
helps.
Modo and Jardin stuff like that for Sweden.
Yeah,
Right?
some of the bigger teams probably have some smaller academy teams. I think I think Switzerland actually weirdly has some too. I had a buddy who played in Switzerland, like obviously moved here, but like played a little bit in Switzerland. Like he said that there was like academy teams there, at least from what he told me. Maybe he's lying, I don't know, but wouldn't be surprised.
Okay, well maybe that's what we need to start doing then. I don't know. The
Yeah, I was gonna
last thing
say.
I'll say regarding the Four Nations, and this is my major takeaway outside of, and this is something that has less to do with the personnel and the players and more to do with just how I think we should approach the NHL going forward. I really think the NHL needs to adopt the Four Nations point system, and I think that change needs to start happening as early as next year.
So
So,
basically just 3-2-1, 3-2-1-0.
so yeah, for people that don't know, the Four Nations system, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is 3 points for a regulation win, 2 points for an overtime or shootout win, 1 point for an OT or a shootout loss, and 0 for a regulation loss. And so it awards you for trying to win in regulation, right? Whereas the current NHL system, it's 2 points that's awarded to the team that wins, regardless of how you do it. So you could win an OT, you could win a shootout, you could win 6-0 in regulation. It's all weighted the same, right? So a team that blows a team out 5-0 in 3 periods versus a team that scrapes out a 10-round shootout and wins 4-3, it's awarded the same. 1 point's awarded to the losing team if it's an OT or shootout under the current system, and same thing with the regulation loss is 0, right? And it's weird because with the current system, a win is a win, but a loss isn't the same. A loss isn't the same. So it influences how teams approach this game, right? Because if you think about it this way, the current system provides an incentive to play for overtime because if you don't win in regulation, there's no consequence to it, right? So if you watch, and you'll notice this when you watch games, right? If games are like tied and they're close, unless there's a specific reason the team has to win in regulation, it leads to a lot of low risk, low event hockey near the end of the third period, and it's kind of boring to watch. I don't know if you've noticed that, but that's been a thing. And it also bears on the statistics because Data Driven Hockey posted this. It's kind of interesting. So between 1983, 1984, and 1998 to 1999, right? So this was before the new system took place. 18.4% of games went to overtime, right? Now, between 1999, 2000 to 2013, 2014, same time frame, it increased to 23.5%. That's a lot.
Also, I remember there was a time where they had OT and they didn't have the shootout too, right? So
Yeah.
I feel like that definitely had an impact on things too. But I was going to say, I thought for a time maybe the NHL should just try the 2-0 system. But then I feel like that point system might be a little bit too stale. Like you're just going to end up with a lot of teams with the same number of points and you're going to have to do like some weird tiebreakers like towards the end of the year. Because I think there's like less, because when you have less ways to award points, there's less variance like between teams with points, right? So, I mean, I'm all for the 3-2-1. But also the one thing I noticed too, I think I noticed too with the overtime games with the current point system, right? You don't see a lot of teams like, I don't want to say taking chances, but the overtime just kind of feel like you just hold on to the puck, loop around, loop back out. Like, do you see what I mean when you watch the OTs nowadays?
It's not as so when OT first happened, it was very fun and gun, whereas now it's teams will hold possession, and you'll notice the same style take place where teams will circle in. And then they'll see if there's an opportunity to break. But if they don't, they just circle back out with the puck. And they'll do it until they have an opportunity. And the other team does the exact same thing. But here's the thing. I can't blame the teams because there's no incentive to do like what they're doing now. There's no incentive to do otherwise. But if you change it to the Four Nations point system, now there is an incentive, right? Because now it makes regular season games more entertaining. And it creates a lot of unique possibilities, right? Like, it incentivizes teams to finish games in regulations because it incentivizes teams to give yourself as much cushion as possible, right? So if you're pushing, you want to win that game in regulation because now that's worth an extra point more, and that can matter in the standings, right? And if you think about it too, it also helps you really differentiate between I hate to say it, like the quality of teams, right? If a team's consistently finishing teams off in regulation, whereas another team's skating by in the shootout or overtime to a ridiculous degree, it'll bear out in the standings. Whereas now it doesn't really do that. And if you even apply it to the Four Nations tourney, right? Think about it. Sweden lost the first 2 games, right? But if you remember, they could have still made the final with a regulation win and a regulation loss by Canada, right? And just the idea of those opportunities that open up, I just think it's something the NHL should go for going forward. I don't see the downside to doing it personally.
Well, I was gonna say too, you're gonna have more impactful like game situations in the NHL, right? Do you remember when Minnesota was kind of desperate to make the playoffs, and they had like I think it was overtime against Nashville. I think they pulled the goalie because they badly needed that extra point. I feel like you'd see more of those situations where, hey, like I need the 3 points more than the 2. We're late in the season; it's our last chance to try to push for the playoffs. Like you see more of those situations where a team pulls the goalie in regulation tied and just goes for it, right? I feel like you see a lot more, I think like you said, exciting hockey, right? Just more exciting moments, more unique moments, like quote unquote. And you'll see teams actually go for it.
More chances to close the gap, right? Like if I'm a team and I'm 3 points behind a team for seeding and I'm going into the last game and you're playing that team, like
I'm pulling the goalie for tied.
I'm going all out to finish, right? But under the current system, if I'm 3 points behind and there's like a game left, for example,
I'm out.
Right? Yeah. Like I'm not catching them. What's the point? I just think it opens up more possibilities. And again, there's no downside to it. And I'd like to separate teams. Like right now, I think, and I hate to say this because it's going to sound like I'm a dick, but I think right now the current point system creates this illusion of parity that isn't there. Like there is a difference in quality between teams that consistently win in regulation, consistently lose in regulation, and go to overtime. Because right now what you have is like, you have a group of elite teams based on points, some really bad teams, and a mucky, murky middle, basically, right? And I think, you need to stop giving teams this illusion that they're better than they are. And I think this helps that as well. So when I look at like the interesting possibilities it creates, the potential for more excitement, and this idea of separating this fake parity that currently exists, I just really think it's a better system going forward.
I will say for the most, I'm looking at the standings for the league, and it's like
you can't use the current standings to make it apply because teams if you
no, but I want to point something out though. It's like it's weird because like there's some teams, so like for example, I'm looking at like at least in the Metro division, right, with like Columbus. Like Columbus only has like 19 regulation wins, but like they're within like striking distance. Like I mean, they have 2 games in hand, so like kind of within striking distance of the Devils, right? So like, I guess you still get like interesting situations like that, but I think the only downside with the 3-2-1 is I'd kind of like to see a way to differentiate between OT and shootout wins. I do think there is because I do think a shootout is drastically different from like an overtime.
I think they're both coin flips regardless, so I'm fine. Like especially if it's 4-on-4, 3-on-3, like I'm. Like, that's a completely different game. Like, I'm okay with keeping OT and shootout the same just for that sake. But I do think a regulation win should be weighted more. Because I think that to me is the ultimate goal, right? In the regulation.
Well, I don't know. I think the way I see it is OT, like 3-on-3 still, there's less skaters on the ice. But I feel like with the shootout, like, it's just 1-on-1, right? Like, I think that's even more of a drastic change. Like, because you go from regulation to like 5v5 to 3v3, and then you just suddenly go to like 1v1, basically, right?
Sure. Like here's the thing: if you want to mod that, sure. I just think at minimum the 3-point system currently should be in place.
Well, I think the problem is what's the way to make the perfect system? Because like, look, let's be honest, the 3-2.
Look, wait. I'm just gonna interrupt you there. There's a saying, and because I just brought this up with my friend the other day because we were having a conversation or something. Never let perfect be the enemy of good. And I think that's the system. That's what the NHL should impose. Like, take this for now. Figure out, like, if you want to change it a bit later.
Okay, but my argument is you have to at least try other things and just see. Because you got to tweak it, try other things. You can't just stay stagnant. I'm not saying 3-2-1's bad. I'm just saying, like, look, you can go with it, sure. But you have to, like, experiment other things. So that's the only way you're going to find out other things are bad, right?
Yeah,
like,
but why not implement it for now and then...
Okay, I never said not to. Okay, no, wait, don't twist my words because I didn't say don't. I never said at all don't implement it. Where in my argument did I say don't implement the system?
But you're talking about the downside of it. It's like, okay, cool, let's figure that out.
Okay, but you have to have both sides of things, right? You can't just look at the upside of something because there's upsides and downsides to everything.
If I'm being honest, I don't see that much of a downside compared to the current system. No, I don't. I really don't. Outside of it allows teams to think they're better than they are. That's legit what it is.
Let's be realistic. There's downsides to everything. That's the reality of life. Like, it's not
okay, but like I'll be honest, I don't think there's that much of a downside compared to the current system. The only one is, like I said, there's this illusion of parity where teams think, like, by points, think they're better than they are. And it's not, and if you really differentiate it by, if like you had a season where teams had to be forced to win in regulation, you'd start to see more striations in teams based on how good they are. And you can tell by goal difference.
My argument is just like, I don't think either system like differentiates between like a overtime or a shootout win, because I do think those two are things, while both are technically coin flips, I think one is like a way more drastic coin flip than the other, right? Like, I think that's you can't deny that, like a shootout versus an overtime. Like, there's a sizable difference.
They're both honestly like, I don't want to say sideshow kind of things, but they are both kind of like, I don't explain it. Like, I always compare.
Well, I was just say one, you have other skaters against you. The other one, you're just playing the goalie.
I kind of compare it to, like, imagine if in the NBA, right, you went to from 5-on-5, and then for one OT, you went to 3-on-3, and then the next OT, if it was still tied, you started playing 1-on-1, right? It's kind of the same idea. Like, the 3-on-3 and 1-on-1 are both different levels of like hokey to me, and I've always felt this way. But like, excuse me, there are different levels of hokey.
Well, I feel like with the NBA, the 1v1 thing would be even more of a drastic thing, right? Because like, let's be honest, if I just send Nikola Jokic against like, I don't know, like Steph Curry, for example, you know what I mean? Like, I think that's not a great example. Like, that's even more of a drastic.
But I just mean the idea of like, it's all hokey to me anyway, so it doesn't matter. Whereas like, winning at 5-on-5 is what we measure everything by. Like, you look at most analytics, it's based like it's looked at as 5-on-5, right? Like, that's the best indicator of what a good team is. It's what their 5-on-5 play is generally. So to me, it's like, let's start with this, and if we want to change, like if you want to somehow weight it differently later, fine. Like, I'd be okay with removing the shootout entirely and just having ties. Like, that's just my take. I'd be okay with that. But
I'd also be fine with just playing OT until someone gets a winner. Because at some point, somebody's going to have to go for it. Because, like, let's be honest, you get tired at some point, someone's just going to go for it. Just say, fuck it, I don't want to be out here any longer.
Pretty much. No, I'd be okay with either. We need the 3 points for a regulation win. Like, badly.
I'm just trying to think. I think in the NHL's history, they've always done 2 points for a win, right? I don't think they've ever done 3 points for a win in any way. I'm just trying to think. I don't think they've ever done that in the past.
But, like, so what?
No, I'm asking. Question.
I don't think so,
bro. Like,
so what,
bro? Every time I say something, it feels like you just like.
I see people complain about this all the time with other sports, where it's like, oh, but what about the previous records? It's like, no one cares about points records for teams in the NHL. No one does.
I mean, I feel like to some degree it has some, like, it should matter to some people. Like, it matters to some degree, right? Because you obviously bet like best regular season team of all time. There's always going to be those little mini titles that you'll have, or you could be like the Tampa Bay Lightning and have the best season of all time. You just lose in the first round, but yeah,
yeah. But like, outside of baseball, like every other sports increase the number of games played for the most part, right? So I mean, baseball is, I think, the only one that's, even baseball, I think, went from 120 to 162. I could be wrong, but like football has increased their games played basically like from 60.
Well, I think football's the only one that's increased it in the recent years, right? Because I think the NHL, NBA, and all the other ones have stayed 82 for, I'm assuming, the past, like, I don't want to say 30. Man, like, I want to say like 30-something years.
I don't know. I just feel like every time we always change something in different sports for innovation's sake. Like, remember, and the NHL back in the day didn't have 2-line passes, right? Like, that wasn't a thing for a while. That just became a thing like around 20 years ago. Post lockout, I mean,
well, I think that's kind of the thing, right? You gotta try some other things to see what works and what doesn't work, right?
I just kind of want to see, because I'm just so tired of watching. And again, it goes back to the point of like, I'm tired of watching these games where near the end of the game, teams just, again, because it's tied, will play for OT, and then they do this thing in OT where they'll just try to outpossess you that entire overtime frame. And, again, they'll do the play where somebody will try to come in for an zone entry. It doesn't work. Whoop it around or pass it back. Come in for another zone and try this again. And then basically try to keep possession the entire time. And then once they lose possession, the other team does the same thing until they go to a shootout, and then whoever wins. Like, there's just no... And it helps make shootouts more rare. I think shootouts were cool at the beginning because they felt so unique and novel. And now we've just seen so many. It's like, does anyone feel excited? Like, every time my team goes to a shootout now, I'm just like, oh, okay.
Well, I think they try to go to 3v3 OT to lower the number of shootouts, right? There was supposed to be more open ice, more, more plays. But I think what happened was teams were just like, well, we'll just hold the puck then. Teams kind of found the loophole.
Teams will always metagame in a way that produces the most efficient results, right? Like, and then we see that with every sport. That's just the way it is.
Or I was going to joke the league will just do something stupid. Like, I was going to reference the MLB, just ban the shift. They'll just do something to get rid of some aspect of the game that they didn't like or whatever.
Yeah, but I think this is just an easier method. I think that's like the one thing I would take away from this tournament from we can apply this directly to the NHL.
Yeah. On an off-topic note, I think what the NHL wants to do is they want to get rid of that stupid going back to their own zone thing in OT, right? If you have the puck and you go to the blue line, you can't go past the red line again. I read something about that. I don't know. Like I said, all leagues are always trying to find different volumes of things to improve like current issues. So, yeah. I mean, the point system sounds like a better fix than that fix, but I mean, I don't know. I'm all for trying different. Like I said, I'm all for trying different things. Like, try it in the preseason. Try it in like we got to try things to figure out what's good, what's bad, right?
And there's no harm in it, right? Like, again, we're fans of other sports. Like, you look at baseball, like everyone was down on the pitch clock and banning the shift when it came out. But like, now you watch the games and they're a lot more aesthetically pleasing to watch. There's some things that I'm not a fan of, like the second, and if you get to extra innings, there's automatically a guy on second base, sure. But, at least you're trying something. And again, sometimes if 2 out of 3 hit, like that's a really good rate, right? And this year, they're trying a challenge system for the umpires in MLB spring training, which isn't that kind of
counterintuitive though? Because you tried to make the game faster, but now you're like you can challenge and it's going to slow I don't know, like maybe it doesn't slow the game down that much, but I feel like it's slightly counterintuitive.
I'm sure there's limits to it, but it's trying something, right? And I think the NHL, like, the problem is the regular season product at times feels really, especially nowadays, because it's just been so long that we've had the same point system, we've had the same rules, like it's just been so stagnant that like I think this would be something to spark up that change. And I don't think there's a way to metagame it the same, at least right now. I'll say that because it could change, but right now off the top of my head,
well, I was gonna joke. Your previous quote was teams will always find a way to metagame things. So I don't know. I feel like somebody might figure it out at some point.
I think the efficiency would be, well, if we're gonna play an OT, maybe we just go for the shootouts, and like you mentioned, but at the end of the day, having that regulation point win will just make such a difference.
I don't know. I think that's the only reason why I would like some differentiation between shootout OT win, because I feel like like the 3-2-1 does a really good job of like fixing what the NHL's current problems has, but then some teams are going to try to be like, well, we'll just play for the shootout now because the OT shootout, same thing. I don't know. I feel like maybe I'm thinking too far ahead with the whole differentiate between OT and shootout, but I feel like it might be. It's good to, I guess, think about what could possibly go wrong with with things, right? And then start to work to fix those.
But yeah, I think that's just my main takeaway. Like, I think it's that. I think it's how much we missed, again, just to reiterate, like how much we missed Olympic hockey, all these cool things we got to see. I just think there's some really good takeaways that like both fans, players, and the NHL can take away from all of this going forward.
Well, I was also going to say we got a lot of new fans of hockey. I feel like just from this tournament, because a lot of people have never watched the game. They were captivated by this.
I was surprised there's people that have never watched. Like, it's weird. It's weird to me how far. Like, we live in a bubble in Canada because no matter what, you'll always see hockey spoken about, discussed in some capacity. Even though I feel like it hits a lull at certain points. Like when football season comes around on weekends, you probably won't hear about it as much. But like, it's weird to me how much. If you remember the '90s, and I hate to again sound old here, but like when the '90s, like hockey. This is when I was a kid, so like I can't even say that like I'm that old. But like when I was in the '90s, hockey felt like it was in the mainstream, right? You had like the Mighty Ducks movies. I remember like there's a picture I have of Tupac wearing a Dallas Stars jersey, right? Like with the middle fingers up. Like Snoop Dogg was rocking the LA Kings, the purple and gold. Like you had all these hockey movies come out with prominent actors, right? Like I said, you had the Mighty Ducks, you had Mystery Alaska. Everyone knew about the Miracle on Ice. Like there were guys in ads like everywhere. Gretzky to LA was this big thing, and hockey was a big thing in the '90s. Like you go back and watch some of those old games, the fan support, like everything is crazy, and it's weird how much. Like if there's one thing I give Gary Bettman criticism for, it's squandering that popularity from that time to what it is now. And if there's anything we can do to get that back, like let's do it.
I also feel like part of that has to do with like I feel like other sports are getting more main like not mainstream but more notoriety and stuff, right? I know at least in Canada, like there's some other sports that are on the rise. I don't know if that's the case for the States, but I guess maybe more people are going into like basketball or like I don't know like football or even like baseball. I don't know. I feel like other sports are definitely getting some more notoriety, so that's probably
Like
why
it just sucks to me that there's people that haven't never seen like peak Alex Ovechkin or seen like peak Connor McDavid or
just don't see it enough.
Watch or just when you watch Cale Makar like some of the things these guys can do. I consider myself spoiled because like again growing up as a kid I got to watch Gretzky, Yager. I didn't really get to watch much of Lemieux, but like like the end of Gretzky.
You saw
Yager,
enough. You saw enough of him though. That's
like Forsberg, Lindros, Correa, Sakic, Yzerman. Like I can go on and on about all those players, and then fast forward, we get Crosby, Ovechkin, like Malkin at his peak. You get Patrick Kane, you get all these guys, like, and then now we get Connor McDavid, Draisaitl, like, and Nathan McKinnon, some of the best scorers the NHL's ever seen, and like people that haven't seen that is just so sad to me.
Well, I mean, Four Nations brought it for everyone to see, right? So I'm glad. I mean, I think that's one of the best things about this tournament, right? Bringing new people into the game.
Yeah, under like, I'll say this like just. I know I was skeptical at first, but to me, this tournament was just an A all around, like no questions. And I'm normally very skeptical about things.
I'd even say I give it an A+. I mean, maybe like A if you wanted more teams in it. That's like the one thing.
More teams and more players, but overall, like it's an A. Like the games were intense. The players, like everyone, put their heart and soul into it. The commentary was great. Like A all around.
And what better way to showcase the Canada-U.S. rivalry with all the talk?
It's the only sport you could do it in because, like, what other sport are we going to compete in?
It's weird because like a lot of people
like that would be so sad if they were talking about like making Canada the 51st state and it was the gold medal game in basketball. I'd just be like, come on, man, come on.
Well, I was gonna say more. It's becoming a little bit more of a thing in soccer now, but a little bit still not quite.
Or like, what if it was like the World Baseball Classic final? Like,
when was the last time Canada was good in the World Baseball Classic? Was that the one time when they played Mexico and they tried to bunt in the ninth inning and then all shit broke hell? Yeah, I was gonna say that's the only time I was actually good.
I know I'm gonna sound biased as a Canadian. I was so happy Canada won because like the reality, and I get it was close, right? Coin flip level close. Like you don't understand, like people that don't know, Canada for the most part sucks at like every other sport. Like they just got good in basketball recently. Like, for the most part, for like a good 30 years, Canada sucked at everything except hockey, major sports-wise, right? And
I was gonna say I grew up watching soccer, and I remember the 8-1 loss to Honduras, and we were supposed to make it to the final round of a CONCACAF qualifying too, so that was pretty brutal. Getting better at soccer.
Canadian basketball was horrible, and even with Steve Nash, it was still pretty bad. Like they're struggling to qualify. Canadian baseball was pretty bad. There's like one or two guys. Like
was it like just Joey Votto and everybody else?
Jason Bay, Eric Gagne, Rich Harden. Like again, listing these guys. Ryan Dempster, I believe, and like
Dempster,
and like and that was it. But here's the thing: they always had hockey, right? And if Canada lost, there would have been a moment where I'd be like, "Man, is the USA just better than Canada at hockey? Like they have that too?" Like, we don't even have that
I
anymore?
mean, hey man, if you have 10 times the population than somebody else, at some point you have to develop better people, right? Like you just have
No,
more.
but like,
Like
how come we don't make that argument for soccer, right? So no, I'm not making that argument.
okay, well, okay, are you talking about the European countries and stuff like that? Because I was gonna
Yeah,
say it's different when you have the infrastructure already in place for that. Plus, look,
but like
let's be honest.
Canada does. They have an entire junior league that's arguably more competitive than like a lot of other, leagues for around the same age groups. It's no contest. Like Canada has the infrastructure. It just would have been a real sad like
Okay, well, no,
moment.
like I mentioned before, the cost of the game's going up. There is less people getting into it in Canada. Like that's not an argument. Like there's less like people that can afford to like play hockey in Canada
No,
now,
for sure.
right?
But I mean, the idea of what it was 10 years ago versus like if the USA won, and I admit, I know it was close. I know it was like a non Binnington save from the US winning. I get it. But like at the end of the day, like that, if the USA won, there would have definitely been like a post mortem. Like every Canadian person would have probably had like a moment of like, oh shit, do we not have this either?
I think I was just more annoyed. I just didn't want to see all the cocky American tweets because all the 51st state like tweets were just kind of irritating. I was like, really? We're just gonna bring the politics and shit into this, really? Like, oh.
I mean, the politics part like sucks, obviously, but like it for me, it was just more
Because
like
I was gonna say, like, we don't like with the whole like Russia thing, like politics aside, we want them in the Olympics because for better for the sport. Obviously, the politic aspect kind of muddles and makes that like iffy. But like that's why I hated like all the talk in the finals, right? Because the people just brought the politics into it. And I don't want to say they almost spoiled it, but they almost kind of did because that was all people were talking about. Like even some of the players.
yeah, no, there was a press secretary, the U.S. press secretary had a statement, and then they called Canada the 51st state or something like that, and they were talking about the hockey game. So no, I agree. I hate when people use sports as like a weaponized form of like a different form of political warfare. It's funny because there are moments when it's done right. Like I remember the Capitals faced the Senators in the playoffs one year, and Bill Clinton and John Critchia had a bet, and the loser had to wear the winning team's jersey, which like stuff like that's always cool. But yeah, I agree, it kind of got weird during now. But like I said, for me, like politics aside, because you would have heard that, like as a fan of Team Canada, I've been like, what? It would be like if the USA lost in basketball to like Canada, right? Like different scale, obviously, but there's just a moment where you're like, what do we do
Yeah,
now?
I remember seeing that melt. I think when the U.S. lost to the Soviets that one time, that like last second bucket. I remember there was like a whole meltdown around that. So I feel like it would have been that kind of level of meltdown if Canada
Or
like
like there
lost.
was a year in Euro or World Cup, I can't remember, where Germany didn't qualify for the knockout rounds, and their entire country had like they completely retooled the entire like way they look at soccer. I remember
I
because
think
it was just
that was the early 2000s. I think you're talking about because that's when they
right. It was
retooled.
such a fundamental shift, and I felt like Canada would have had the same thing because if you think about it, if Canada lost this, there was the two junior years recently where they haven't done well, and then compound it with, and they've lost to the Czech Republic in the juniors twice, and like compound it with losing to the U.S. and the trash talk from the USA, it would have felt really sad. So I am like, as a Canadian fan, I'm so glad they won. Like,
I mean, I think you speak for every Canadian fan right now.
like, because it would have hit different. It just I hate to say it, it just hits different.
Part of me wonders if the loss would have been better to was like a wake up call, like just wake up, like we're not like maybe
No,
we
I'm
gotta
not thinking
sort
that
our
way
shit
right
out.
now. I'm
I don't know. I feel like sometimes you need to go two steps like go take some steps
I
back and go
hope
forward
I
kind of
hope the
thing.
junior losses are enough for that, and I just hope the idea that like it was close is
Well, I was gonna say
enough
the
for that.
juniors things are more maybe take your best players the next time.
Yeah.
Like take your best play. I was gonna say Canada kind of did that same thing where they didn't take their best goalies and we almost paid the price for it. I'll say.
I don't know, man. Again, it was like great hockey overall, but like absolutely the change of emotions was yeah. As a Canadian fan, was wild. Any other takeaways you had regarding it? Anything else or?
Not for now. No. I guess you want to move on to guess that player then, or
Sure. Um, all right. So for people that don't know, each segment or each podcast we do guess that player. So the rule is 3 point system. So no, sorry. Yes, 3 point system. Sorry. So basically we pick a random player, kind of related to one of the things we talked about on this podcast. The opposing person has to guess. It alternates each week. It's 3 if you get it clean. First guess, no hints. 2 points after the first hint. 1 point after the last hint. And then 0 if you don't get it correct. We're tied 2-2 so far. And the 2 hints are, so one of the hints is where that player was born. The other one is where they were drafted. And if they weren't drafted, what college or team were they with?
Okay, sounds good. All right, you ready to go?
All right, let's see what we got. Let's see.
This one might be a little bit of an obvious one, but we'll see. I don't know. I had to pick something related to the theme, so.
Defenseman. Huh. His career has just ended? That's okay. So he didn't
that's all the years that's on there.
He didn't get traded, which is interesting. So he just signed with Jersey. Funny because Ryan Murray played for both, but like, Jack Johnson too played for like a lot of these teams except Edmonton. Funnily enough, I think.
I'm trying to
seems
think,
like a Ryan. This seems like a Ryan Murray. Columbus. It's not Severson because Severson didn't play with the other 2 teams listed. But I don't know. Did Ryan Murray never played for Edmonton? Did he? It's also someone that would have had to break in at a really young age, which is interesting. No awards, so like that rookie year didn't mean shit. Okay. Not a high point scorer. I'm trying to think what the connection. So it's Olympics. There's no way this is Rostislav Klesla because I think Klesla played for the.
Well, Klesla was like a lot further back. I was gonna say like he was like 02.
Yeah,
I know. That's not.
It's just like a mediocre defenseman.
I guess
so bad to say.
Do you want the first hint?
Yes. Where was he born?
So he was born in Saskatchewan. He was in Regina specifically.
God, now I'm 2021-22 played for Colorado. This screams Ryan Murray. But did Ryan Murray play in Edmonton though? And his career's just is Ryan Murray still in the league? Hold on. Now I'm like really thinking about this. God. Saskatchewan. So Ryan Murray is Canadian. So, okay. But what's the connection to? Was born? Is there anyone on Team Canada that played for Columbus? No. Okay, I'm just gonna guess Ryan Murray. Yeah.
So the answer is Ryan Murray, and the connection is so I don't know if you remember the World Cup of Hockey. He was a part of the Team North America.
Was he? Why?
Yes, he was actually one of the guys on Team North America. It's kind of crazy, but the last time we had, I guess.
Wait, wasn't that like the best 23 and under players in the league?
Yes.
How? No. Really?
I can pull up the roster for you.
I believe you, but like that's just so weird to me. There weren't better players.
I think I wonder if they just needed like a defensive, like kind of like defenseman, and that's kind of what they went for. I don't know if that was.
Wait, his career's so his career's over.
Yeah, he's a free agent right now.
What the fuck?
So yeah,
I just didn't remember the Edmonton part. The other two, Man, is there a worse 1-2 in NHL history than Yakupov and Ryan Murray?
Probably not, man.
Like that has to be the worst, right?
So I guess the defensemen for that Team North America that year were Aaron Ekblad, Shane Gostisbehere, Seth Jones, Ryan Murray, Colton Parayko, Morgan Riley, and Jacob Trouba. I think those were the defensemen on that roster.
That's minus Murray. That's not bad. I mean, at that time at least, right? Because like Trouba obviously like is a lot worse now, but
I mean Parayko at least I don't know if I argue he's good enough to make Canada, but like at least he was on this iteration of the roster, right? So I think Trouba's the only one that's kind of meh, I guess now. Like Trouba,
I'm gonna look
Seth
this
Jones.
up for the next one. Is there a worse 1-2 than Yakupov? There can't be. There's just no way. Or if it is, it's like from the 80s or something.
I'm looking this up right now. I am kind of curious. Let's see.
There can't be a worse 1-2 in NHL history. Like, even the Alex, like every other year, that's like the 2 was the hit, but maybe the 1 was the miss. Or like, there's no way.
I'm trying to look, man. Like, let's see. Ricky, 1, 2. Okay, there is one other one I'm thinking about, but I actually don't know who went number 2 this year. Hold on.
It's not Alex Daig's year, right?
No, because number 2 was Chris. I'm pretty sure it was Chris Pronger. Okay, no, that doesn't work. I was thinking of Rick DiPietro, but Danny Heatley was number 2 that year. So.
Okay. If you think about it, these guys combined. What's crazy is the top 2 picks basically combined for what? Yakupov played 4 seasons? Like your top 2 picks combining for 13 NHL seasons, and like not even full seasons in Ryan Murray's case is kind of that's not great.
I have one more draft I'm thinking about, which is the 2006 one. Does that count? Like, I think Eric Johnson went 1. I guess Eric
Taves
Johnson.
went 2.
No, it was Jordan Stahl. Taves went 3.
Oh, Taves went 3. No, because would Jordan Stahl is at least a Selke candidate year in and year out.
I guess, but like that's another argument. If you're gonna say like if in terms of what you spend,
and that's not worse than Yakupov. And Yakupov was out of the league in 4 years. And again, I don't even remember Ryan Murray playing for Edmonton and Colorado. Like Ryan Murray's out of the league. A number 2 pick being out of the league at 29, not due to injury, is crazy.
I think the other problem is it's hard to find a year recently where the first overall pick was like really bad. Because like 2013 feels like the or 2012, I guess it was 2020. It was technically the 2012 draft, but that's the only draft that really felt like the first overall pick was really, really bad. Because like I'm looking at every other year, the first overall pick is either pretty damn good or at least like serviceable NHLer, right? Like I'm looking, Matthews, McDavid Matthews.
Well, that's why everyone says it's always worth tanking for the top pick. Man, this is okay. I'll say this. This is and people are going to say I'm excluding number 11, who's Philip Forsberg, but I think 10's a nice number. This is probably the saddest top 10 of a draft I've ever seen. Nail Yakupov, Ryan Murray, Alex Galchenyuk, Griffin Reinhart, Morgan Riley's been good, yes. Hampus Lindholm, Matt Dumba, Derek Pouliot, Jacob Trouba, and Slater Cuckoo. I forget how you say his last name, but that has to be one of the worst top 10s of all time. That has to be the worst top 10 of all time.
I'm not gonna lie. Given the consensus, I know that was the year that when Brian Burke talked about it, they had Morgan Riley as the number 1, like as their like the number 1 overall pick. Like I don't know if you read the Spitting Chicklets one where he talked about how Nail Yakupov was like the worst draft interview he's ever done. But basically, I know people are giving Burke shit at the time for that, but honestly, given the circumstances, like if with what they had at the time and like what he said now, seems like he actually had the right idea out of all the people, low key.
Which is funny because like some of the late picks weren't bad. Like again, Forsberg went 11, Vasilevsky went 19, Teravainen. Like there's a run of Tom Wilson, Hurdle, Teravainen, Vasilevsky from 16 to 19, which is pretty good, right? But overall, this has to be one of the worst top 10. The top end of this draft is all time bad.
I was gonna say Freddie Anderson in the 3rd round was like another one, and then I'm looking at some of the other rounds. Slavin in the 4th round is a pretty good one. That's a pretty good one actually.
Yeah,
I'm just trying to see in the 5th. You forgot Hellebuck was in the 5th round of this year.
So yeah, one of the worst top 10s all time. I think the worst top 2 if you're even going to top 3, worst top 3 of a draft of all time, like no question.
Yeah, probably. I think that probably qualifies. It's hard because like a lot of years you can always find like a really bad 1, really bad.
That's
2,
what I'm saying.
really
Like
3.
Like sometimes people whiff on the 1, but the 2 is right, or they whiff on the like maybe the first guy's just really good, and then the second and third guy are like real consolation prizes, right? But like you never have a top 3 where you're like, oh, all these guys suck.
Yeah, they're all basically busts. Like you say, they're pretty much all busts.
Yeah.
Who was 3 again? Remind me who was 3 again?
Galchenyuk. And one good year.
One good year, okay.
That's it.
I mean, I hate to say that's still better than most of the other two guys, right? Because Yakupov had decent rookie year, and then wheels fell off the bus.
All right, so I'm up 4-2 going into our next podcast. So next podcast, I think we're just going to talk about what our like questions and trends going into the last 30ish games of the year.
Yep. And then we'll make some predictions as to what we think will like happen over these course of these 30 games. Also, I think I guess with the wild card race kind of tightening up, we can also put in our predictions to see who we think will get those last two spots for both conferences. Because there is a bit of a race, I think, at least at the East, I think. I don't know, not so much with the West. But
no, the West is weird because Colorado's been backsliding hard, but it doesn't matter because they're so far ahead of whoever fifth is in the Central right now. And then the Pacific, it's like Vancouver's fighting against themselves right now. So it's like the top four in the Central are fine. The Pacific's a little bit iffy, but I think like the 8 feels, at least 7 of 8 feel kind of secure. I think it's Vegas, Edmonton, and LA for sure. And then the top 4 of the Central's already been decided, I feel like.
Yeah, I was trying to boot up the NHL standings, but it won't even load, so I guess we'll find out. We'll find out
just to give you an idea, I can just pull it up for you quickly, but just to give you an idea. Like the Avs have 68 points, the Blues have 60, Utah has 59. So like, again, and the Blues, I don't want to be mean, they're not going to be the type of team to make up that gap. And then the interesting race I think comes down to like the Flames and the Canucks for that last spot. Again, 64, 63 points. They're kind of they even both have the same goal differential, minus 14. I feel like they're both duking it out. But yeah, I feel like it's really that last spot between those two teams. Unless, because like St. Louis has 60 points, but they played 2 more games than the Flames and the Canucks. So,
well, I was gonna say, like I said, the East seems more like interesting because there's 4 teams battling out for that last like wild card spot, right? So
pretty much, yeah.
So, I mean, I love to see Columbus hold on, but spoiler alert.
All right. Any other things you want to talk about before we sign off?
No, I think we're good. I'm looking forward to the next episode. I mean, I'll be there, and I'm hoping to see some of you fans there too.
Well, I hope you'll be there. That'd be kind of weird if I was just kind of sitting there by myself.
If I just get sick again, maybe not. Who knows? I'm just kidding. I just recovered from a freaking cold, man.
Like, it'd be funny if it ended up being a really good pod. I was just talking. Like, that would say a lot, wouldn't it?
Rami, you can find yourself a new editor, bro. That's all I can say.
All right, guys. For us at the Crease, we're signing out.
All right, take care, guys. Peace.
Later.